Hello everyone and welcome to the channel, and in this video I want to talk about the artwork of Shane Walsh, Abraham Ford and Rick Grimes that was shown in the Walking Dead Telltale Definitive Edition. Now before I start, I just want to let you know that this video will contain spoilers for both the Walking Dead comic book and the Walking Dead Telltale game. So with that said, let's begin. Okay, so here's something I want to clear up. The Walking Dead game by Telltale is canon to the Walking Dead comic. Now what that means is that the games take place in the comic universe, not the TV universe. If you want to know what takes place in the TV universe, stuff like Fear the Walking Dead, the webisodes, and The Walking Dead Survival Instinct take place in the TV universe, while stuff like The Walking Dead comic, the Telltale games, and the Woodbury novels take place in the comic universe. Now, when this artwork was shown off, people were obviously very curious as to why there was artwork to Shane and Abraham and Rick in this game, because those characters never made an appearance in the game. So people were very curious to see like why they're in the game, and from what I've heard, there is no evidence that shows I don't think anyone at Telltale ever came out and said why. So I'm going to give some of my theories as to why I think that artwork exists and why it was done in the first place. Now, first thing I want to say is Shane's name in this artwork is said as Shane Walsh, and in the comic book Shane does not have a second name. Well, he probably does, but we just never hear it in the comic. Shane Walsh is something more from the TV show, but whatever, that's happened before. I think some people have referred to Glenn in the comics as Glenn Rhee, even though Glenn Rhee is something that was made up for the show. But yeah, so here's number one why I think they did the artwork for Abraham, Shane and Rick. When this game was proposed to Skybound and the people there, including Robert Kirkman, I think maybe what they did was they had the artist draw these characters from the comic book as a way to show this is what they could look like in the game, just like as a test. That's one theory. Another theory is that originally this game wasn't going to be canon, and that the story would have taken a lot more, liberties with crossing over with the comic, but because it is canon and they have to be careful not to fuck up the canon of the comic book, they had to tone down the crossovers. Now, crossovers do still happen in the Telltale game series. Like even in this one right here, we have Glenn who appears, we have Herschel who appears, and his son Sean appears. And we even see how Sean dies and why he's a walker in the comic books. So there was definitely crossover, and other things that, make this game connected with the comic is the prison Lee was going to, and the prison Vince and the other prisoners in Vince's story were going to is the same prison from the Walking Dead comics that first appeared in issue 12 and pretty much stayed as the main home of the survivors for a while until the governor came and fucked that up. Anyway, another major connection to the comic in the first season is when you are being taken to the prison, the police officer talks about a man he arrested, about how he cut up his wife And this person he's talking about is Thomas Richards. Now, Thomas Richards is a character that first appeared in issue 13 of the comic book, and they first encountered him when Rick and Tyrese were going through the prison trying to clear it out, and they stumbled across a few prisoners, and this guy Thomas Richards, you know, like when they saw them all, when Rick and Tyrese saw the prisoners in the cafeteria, we learned a bit about the prisoners, like why they got sent there. One prisoner, his name is Dexter. He says he went there for murder. Thomas Richards says he went there for tax fraud. Andrew says he went there for drug possession, and Axel says he went there for armed robbery. I'm pretty sure that was it, because it's been a while since I've read that part of the comic, but I'm pretty sure that was the reason for all four of them. And this guy Thomas Richards, what he does is he killed two of Herschel's youngest daughters, Rachel and Susie, cut their heads off, and later on even tried to kill Andrea, but he was found out, and Rick beat him within an inch of his life and said he was going to hang him. But when one of Rick's group tried letting Thomas out, the character of Patricia, Maggie shot Thomas Richards for killing her sisters, and then they threw Thomas's dead body out of the prison to be eaten by walkers, while Maggie's dad Herschel and her brother Billy watched. So that's what happened to Thomas Richards in the comic book. So yeah, there was quite a few connections. Now, here's the thing. The Walking Dead game takes place right as everything is beginning, you know, like the season starts off, things are still normal, you know, you're going off to prison for God's sake, you know, things are normal. And at this point in time, Rick would be in a coma, so him appearing doesn't really make sense. Now, I have a theory. If you notice the artwork of the characters, you can see it's a full body image of Shane and Abraham, but the image of Rick is more his body and his head. So I'm thinking, what if the police officer that was taking you to the prison was actually going to be Shane, and maybe he would have had a picture of Rick in his car, and you know, that would have been why we see those characters in it. Because now, as for Abraham, the thing with Abraham is, if you know, like, season 1 of The Walking Dead takes place over the span of a few months, because after episode 1 they do a 3-month time skip, and another like couple weeks go by between episode 2 and then the final episode of season 1. And it's possible maybe the characters would have did a bit more traveling in an earlier version of the game, because we know in an earlier version of season 1 you would have had the mob chasing you, and obviously that didn't happen. So maybe in an earlier version of the game you would have went more south, and you maybe would have ran into Abraham, because that character would probably not even be on his way to DC at that point. So he probably would have still been with his family during the time of season 1 of The Walking Dead. So yeah, that's my theory with those 3 characters. Now, hopefully someday something will get released, because, you know, these are very interesting things, and it's not like you're spoiling anything. I mean, these characters, you know, the Telltale series is done, the comics themselves are even done, and, you know, like, what harm would it do in telling us why you drew these characters? Because it would have been cool to see these characters in the game, and yeah, it would have been nice. However, you know, they didn't appear, but we still got Glenn and Herschel and Sean, and then even later on in the game we got In season 3 we had Jesus appear, and in the Michonne miniseries we obviously had Michonne appear, Pete appear, and Sadiq appeared. And then in the final season of The Walking Dead, even though this character was never seen in the comic, he was a part of a group from the comics, and that was James, who was a member of the group The Whisperers. Now, another thing I want to mention is the thing with Abraham, what I meant by the characters traveling a lot more, because at the start of the game you're just coming out of Atlanta, Georgia, and then by the end of the game you're in Savannah, Georgia. So they do quite a bit of traveling in the game. So as I was saying, like maybe in an earlier version of the game they would have done a lot more traveling. Now, I also want to say, if you want to watch another video on this topic, domedthebomb put up a video on this topic, and he's done plenty of videos on the Walking Dead game, along with other Telltale games. He does videos on The Last of Us, and he has done videos on other games as well. So if you are interested in the Telltale series and other Telltale games and The Last of Us, check out his channel. He, as I said, like, he did a video on this topic a couple days ago, and you know, now I'm doing my video on it. Like, this game was released a few months back, and I remember seeing the artwork and I was just like, that was interesting. And it took me a while to actually do a video on it, and when I saw Dom's video I was like, I should really do my video on this, like give my thoughts on all this and say why I think they were drawn. Now, I don't want this video to go on too much longer, but usually that ends up happening because I just run my mouth in these videos. But yeah, overall, these three characters are definitely interesting, as Rick is, like, in my opinion, Rick is the most important character in the whole franchise. Because if you've read the comics, and this is a major spoiler for the whole comic series and even like the ending of the comic, Rick pretty much, and I'm going to say the spoiler right now, so just to let you know, in the comic towards the end of it, when they introduce a huge community, Rick gets killed by this little punk ass bitch called Sebastian Milton, and because of the sacrifices Rick made and the people he's helped, what happens is eventually people take back the country in honor of Rick, and they even make a statue in Rick's honor. And you know, Carl grows up to be a full-on, you know, like he's a father himself. He has a daughter, and he's reading stories of the great Rick Grimes to his daughter. And you know, like, this group they find towards the end of the book has pretty much made the whole eastern part of the states a safe zone. So I imagine after the events of season 4, the final season of the Walking Dead game, I imagine eventually this group, the Commonwealth, maybe eventually found Clementine's group, and maybe Clementine could be a part of the Commonwealth now along with AJ. So you know, that's pretty cool. Hopefully, you know, because that's like, it'd be pretty cool to know that Clementine, because if Clementine's safe, you know, like, a lot of fans want that, because by the end of the comic book, walkers are pretty much almost extinct. There's very few of them around, and any zombie you do find, they are worth a lot of money. Well, not necessarily money, but a lot of what they use as currency. So that's interesting. So after Rick dies, you may be wondering who pretty much became like the new leader. A lot of people would think Carl became the new leader. No, he actually wanted to just live a quiet life on a farm with his wife Sophia and their daughter Andrea, and Andrea Jr., because in comic books Andrea eventually got together with Rick and became Carl's new mother. And so if Carl didn't take over the Commonwealth after Rick died, who did? Maggie. Maggie actually eventually became the president of the Commonwealth, and pretty much like the president of the, at least the eastern side of the country. So yeah, if you haven't read the comic book, even though I basically said what happens in the ending, check out the comic books because they really are good. Like, really fucking good. Also, they tie up a loose end from the Telltale games, if you're wondering, and if you're not going to read the comic, I might as well tell you. So here is the loose end they tie up. When I was talking about characters that have appeared in the comic and then appeared in the Telltale games, if you remember the Michonne miniseries and Michonne never finding out what happened to her daughters, Colette and Elodie, Colette, Elodie, Michonne's eldest daughter, actually was a member of the Commonwealth, and she told Michonne that Michonne's ex-husband Dominic died and that her younger sister Colette died. So you do get resolution to Michonne's family in the comic book. So definitely check out the comics. Plus, the comics are fantastic. They are definitely worth a read, and you know, now that the series is over, you can just run right through the comic, and you're going to have a fucking blast reading them because you don't have to stop. You can just keep going and going and going. And because we're all basically in lockdown now is the perfect time to read the comic. So the comics are definitely worth checking out for that. Anyway, so I kind of went on a tangent there, but my final words on this, it would have been interesting to see Rick, Abraham, and Shane in the Telltale game. Definitely, I'm okay that they didn't show them because, again, Rick at this point was in a coma. Abraham was probably still in Texas by this point, and I imagine Shane around this time was busy getting Lori and Carl to Atlanta. So yeah. However, like, having Glenn and Herschel fit in, they actually made that work, and I think that's pretty cool. So that's my thoughts on this. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Thank you very much for watching, and peace out.